Alright, today I'm going to be building a floating shelf to go under this television. I'll show you what the end result will look like here. I want to show you what we did in the other room. I'm also going to put this cord and a track going over to the receptacle so that it looks a little better. So, this is the master bedroom. Don't mind the little Apple TV cables. That's a temporary thing. We haven't put them in the track yet. But this is what we're looking to have as a finished result. It's just a light-duty little floating shelf that goes under the television that we can keep the controls, a candle, you know, just little decorative items on. Okay. I'm going to make the first cut. Now this board, it's kind of, we really like this for the furniture we've built. It's kind of cobbled together out of many different pieces of wood. So it just gives a really nice effect once it's all stained. And the problem is that Lowe's doesn't always have these. And this time they only had the 16-inch wide version, which is wider than my miter saw will cut in one slice. I'm going to try to cut it, flip it, and then cut the remaining part. I'm cutting the board down to a usable size, so my first cut will be the total length of the longest slice that I'm going to use for the shelf. So, let me just set up here and get a nice, there we go. Of course, always safety first. Now with the sliding miter saw, you want to remember to always make sure that the cut is lined up where you need it to be. Always, always, always remember to measure twice, 3 times, whatever it takes, and cut once. I hate wasting the lumber. So I'm going to make my cut as far as I can with the slider, and then I'm going to flip the board. Really, that mostly made the cut. We're very, very close here. The trick is to line your next cut up perfectly. I think this blade's getting a little dull. I used it when I did the laminate flooring, which your laminate flooring, of course, is not wood, it's basically hardboard. So, because we're going to use the sliding saw, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the blade out so that it fits in the existing groove, and then I'm going to come down. To get 90-degree cuts, make sure you've got your board up against the rail. I don't think this is going to fall. I've got the table extended as far as it will, but just be careful. Be prepared. It could happen. Always be careful with a saw. Very dangerous tool. Alright, but now we've got our board cut to the length that we're going to need, 42.5 exactly, which will be our longest length. My next step is I'm going to start ripping it on the table saw. So I've got my fence rail lined up on the 2 1/8 mark. We're going to do this cut. And you kind of dig to make sure that you've got enough blade exposed. Start saw, and remember to hold the outside edge against the rail. That's how you make the accurate cut. best tools for accurate cuts. I'm now going to use this piece to make the sides and the front of my shelf. The next piece I need will be 4 3/8 inches wide. So I'm going to adjust the fence here. 4, 4.5. That's 4 3/8 inches. Okay, so still under a half. Raw materials for sure. So this board will be my front and my sides of the finished shelf. I need 2 sides that are 4 3/8 inches long. Always remember to account for the width of your blade when you're making your cuts. Slide it away from myself. The secret to a floated shelf, the way it works, what makes it float, is that there are 2 brackets, bars, whatever you want to call it, attached to the studs in the wall, coming out like so, that the shelf slides over. I just use scrap wood for these. I'm going to use some of the cast off that I have from this other piece, from the waste, if you will, to reduce the waste. It doesn't have to be cut particularly precisely. It just has to be small enough that it will be completely covered within the shelf that we're building. This is rough work. You don't have to do any measuring here. I just eyeball what's going to be smaller than the inside length. Be careful with smaller cuts like this so you don't have a finger in the way. And the next step is I'm going to pocket hole drill them so that I can mount them up to the wall very tight. I've already done a quick video on how the pocket hole jig works, but you just want to get it measured for that board. This is the appropriate hole will be the top hole because it's a narrower board. You see it's got the drill bit that's got a small diameter going out to a larger diameter, and then going at the angle it cuts a nice pocket hole shape. Put it in high. And it's time. So, get everything laid out to start assembly. Remember, these are what's going to hold the shelf to the wall. The shelf has got to be designed such that it will slip over these. So just simply take your top and your bottom piece, rest them on these 2 pieces. That way you're going to have the gap that you do a little tweaking. You know, this is we're gonna move it around a little bit, get what feels right. It doesn't help at all to have a dirty workstation like I do. That sawdust will make things look a lot less neat than it's throwing angles in your right one. All the cuts weren't too bad. I actually used a little thicker last time. What you can do, I think I might use a clamp here just to make it a little easier. This is the tricky part. Once you get your first brad in here, it gets a lot easier. You've got to get everything lined up before you start putting brads in. It'll get it the way I want. Getting your angles nice and flat is critical. And everything all flush. One brad is going to make a huge difference. Dangers of working in a shop. Very much a perfectionist. So that's going to start holding it together, and now I can actually make this look decent. You're probably going to end up having a little bit of gap to fill with some wood filler. I usually do. You have to do a little sanding to make it nice and smooth. But my goal is to eliminate as much of that as possible by getting accurate. From the get-go. Almost there. You're gearing and try to flip it. It's only connected on one side, so you have to support the bottom of it. Pieces up. And once you get the first brad in, it's going to start getting a lot easier. Third hand here. Sorry if you can't see a lot of this when I'm working. So I shot about 3 brads out that time because I didn't have the safety all the way down. It's fine. It'll be very well held together right there. gun aimed right, and it shot through at an angle. So that's going to require a little wood filler, and that probably has just become the bottom of the shelf, so it won't show as bad. These little brads have almost no head on them, so just pull it straight through. Get it out of there. A little additional sanding, a little additional wood filler, and you'll be fine. Put another one in. At a better angle so that doesn't happen again. But now we've got our floating shelf. The next step is going to take some sanding, some finishing, make it pretty, and then we're going to stain it, and we'll finally put the polyurethane on it. We'll be done. So I have the wood filler in and cleaned up. It's looking pretty reasonable now. It's ready for, almost ready for the pre-stain conditioner. There is one little caveat. I'm going to have this piece of channel against the wall with the wires in it. I need this to have a notch cut out to fit over the channel. That gets a little tricky. So what I did is I measured out the center of the shelf, and then I just kind of traced where it's actually going to go. So what I'm going to do from there, and I'm kind of experimenting as I go, is I'm going to drill 2 guide holes, and then I'm going to use a jigsaw to cut to those guide holes. So where I traced, I'm going to make my drill, my hole. Feel like that bit is a little dull. Then I'm just going to take the battery off of this. Probably one system. It is the best. Yeah, that's going to be very tricky. I'm going to mark the other side too. This is... I don't know of an easier way to do this. This is something that is a little beyond my grade. Of course, I kind of cut into my workbench there. It's okay. You can make a bigger notch by just cutting a wider spot. Now we're actually into the holes that I drilled. Did a lot better than I expected it to. Yeah, that will work. Clean it up a little bit on the bottom here. It looks awful. I'm just going to trim it up a little bit, make it look nice, and then I will be ready to pre-stain, condition it, and stain. Well, our piece is dry. I have sanded down the wood filler, the stainable wood filler, so that we've got kind of a nice smooth area with no gaps. On this piece of wood, I'm going to precondition the wood before I stain it with a pre-stain conditioner, which what that is a very thin varnish that soaks into the wood just a little bit and becomes the surface that the stain adheres to. So you don't have to use that. I've gotten to where I use it on everything just to be safe, but the problem I've run into before, especially on pieces of wood like this, is you have a lot of variety. So the stain's not even. You know, a piece of wood that, let's see if I can get that in the frame here. You can see that this piece of wood is a lot different than this piece of wood. The stain's going to soak in differently. It's different hardnesses. It's just not going to be as even as it could be. Your pre-stain conditioner takes care of all of that. And just follow the instructions of the manufacturer. And just load up your brush and just smoothly brush it in. Light strokes. And you're supposed to let it soak in for 5 to 15 minutes. And then you will wipe off excess with a cloth. Another thing is, if you use the stainable wood filler like I have, that definitely will stain at a different, will stain differently than your, my workbench is always crowded. Normally I don't work on this workbench like this, but I want to for the video. Alright, well, it's really hot, so I let this set for about 5 minutes, which is about all I've ever done with the pre-stain conditioner. And you might can see it's kind of changed the color of the wood slightly. Wipe it off with a nice clean cloth. There was no excess left on this, but I'm following the instructions rules. And today I will be staining with Minwax Wood Finish Penetrating Stain Dark Walnut. Let me tell you about stain. True to its name, it stains everything you touch. Another thing, a good, clean rag will be you have to have it for any kind of staining process. What you do is you'll put the stain on the wood, you'll let it soak for about 5 to 15 minutes. I'm going to go about probably 10 to 12. You kind of eyeball it, watch it get the color that you want it to have. Then you use your rag and you wipe off the excess. That rag will be ruined afterwards, so make sure it's a rag you can part with. Do not. And also it's a rag that, not like those red shop rags that the fibers just peel off while you're wiping things, and you can ruin your project like that. Do not use your wife's decorative towels out of the bathroom thinking they'll finally be useful for something. They will not get clean, she will find out, you will get in trouble. So, again, I like the little brushes, or the little sponges for brushes. You go with the grain. And you just lay it on. And a lot of times I've had to go back and kind of even it out a little bit. Smooth strokes is important. Add a little bit more. You want it to look pretty consistent. So you can really eyeball and see the consistency. And here in a minute we're going to wipe this off. Alright, we've been soaking for about 3 minutes. You'll start to kind of notice. Come on, focus. See if that focuses well enough. You'll start to notice how it starts to look dry in places and then kind of wet in others. That's one of your telltale signs that it's starting to be dry enough to, because what will happen is it soaks into the softer wood, dries out, and then the harder wood it stays a little bit pooled up on. I don't think we're quite there yet, but we're very close. You can see as you look down how it's drying in places. Alright, you can really see now where it started to dry. And I guess it's probably been about 7 minutes. It says to go up to 15. I've seldom gone that long, and I'm trying to be consistent with other pieces I've done in the house. So at this point, I'm just going to wipe it off, just like you do with the brush, you do with the grain. Just a nice firm pressure. And what you're doing is you're taking the stain that did not soak in, or has not soaked in yet, just right off the top. Alright. And staining is fun. I've said earlier I don't like finishing, and I don't. It takes a long time. But the results that you get from staining is fun. It looks really pretty really quickly. Well, the stain has completely dried. I actually let it dry for a couple of days just because I got really busy with life. And now I'm going to apply the polyurethane. I use a Minwax brand semi-gloss polyurethane, but whatever you use, just follow the manufacturer's instructions. Be careful not to shake it, as that can cause bubbles, and you want it to be nice and flat. Somebody described this as laying down liquid plastic, and I think that's about the best way I've ever heard it described. So you want to make very smooth, even brush strokes. Now, you want a high quality brush, which gets expensive, and I have a lot of trouble getting them clean after using this. So I've been buying these brushes from the Dollar Tree. They're $1. They're good enough quality for anything I've done, and I don't even bother cleaning them. I throw them away at the end. Since I'm going to end up throwing away a $15 brush anyway, I don't see a lot of difference. But just start at one end, and just very smoothly and slowly apply the polyurethane. The goal is to make one stroke all the way across. I think my brush is getting a little dry. They say to make only one stroke. Like just there, I've gotten off track. I've had to go back and make another stroke and even it out. And I've always had very good luck with it. I've never had a problem. At least for my purposes. So, where this does get slow is it takes 3 to 4 hours to dry. I'm always doing a little bit after work in the evenings. You can't really flip it over at this point. You know, you're committed to one side. So, you know, this is about as much as I can get done for tonight. I'll come back tomorrow. But you can see already the big difference it's made. Now it's going to dry, and we're going to apply a second coat. Alright, well, quite a bit of time has passed, actually a couple of days, because it was raining, and you're really not supposed to do any of the finishing during rainstorms because it's just too humid to dry. The first coat is very dry now. We're ready for the second coat. And you'll notice it's not that shiny because it's just the one coat. And if you feel anything after your first coat of polyurethane, it's very rough. What happens is the polyurethane soaks into the first, or into the soft layers, and then any little peaks, it just kind of stands up on. So you want to take a very fine grit sandpaper, and you want to just sand it to knock that off. And it's going to turn it all kind of white and scratched up, and you're going to think it's ruined, but don't worry, your next coat is going to go on glass smooth, and you can feel very quickly the difference that it makes, how much smoother it gets to the touch. It just takes a second, just not even a lot of pressure, just a light pressure. You can see it goes from beautiful to ugly very quickly. Now your next layer of polyurethane goes on very easily because you've already got a layer of polyurethane on there. So it doesn't take very much. It's not soaking into anything. It's already got the coat. And it just lays right on. And then you let it dry for another... We'll let this one probably dry till late this evening when I will have this done and install it. One thing after you do sand it, just wipe it off really good, get rid of all that dust, and I'll be back in just a second to polyurethane it. And we're back. We got all the dust wiped off, the sanding's done, it feels nice to the hand. You just apply your second coat of polyurethane in exactly the same way. But like I said, you'll notice the second coat The brush will go a lot further before you have to reload the brush. You could put a third coat. I've done that on like a bar top. Typically for these kind of things, I think 2 coats looks good. You've got to let it dry in between each coat, so you'll see if you like it or not. And in my experience, it kind of settles a little bit. You know, it may look a little bit brush strokey after you go to apply the second coat, because it's not soaking in, it's got nowhere to go. But I find that when it dries a lot smoother than it looks. But I do try to rub out any major bumps that you can see while it's drying. I'm going to finish up the other sides, let this dry, and put it on this evening. Well, we're at the finishing touch now. We're just going to mount the little boards that we pocket hole drilled at the beginning of this to the wall. I've already marked where my studs were. I'm just going to double check the stud marking. Yep. Okay. Good thing I did that. That stud's a little bit off of my estimate. You have to make sure you go into a stud with these. It's imperative. Because it wasn't that bad after all. If you don't, any weight, just pull it right out. You really don't even have to pre-drill these. I've marked what will be level for each one, and I've installed the track. You could pre-drill if you want. I don't think it's going to be necessary. I'm going to bring each of these brackets up even with the lines that I marked that were level. That's how you can tell you've really gotten a good solid screw there. Alright. So there's now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 holes. The initial hole that I put should have had a stud in it, and I think that you've got a real serious crown in the stud. These screws I'm using are just long enough to catch the stud. It caught it fine here, but I actually had to get a drill and find where I was getting wood shavings coming back out with the drill bit. So I went and found a much longer screw. We should be able to make this work. You've got to kind of think on your feet with projects like this. Things happen, things go wrong. There we go. Put a little bit bigger bit on it, but I think we finally found lumber behind the drywall. Although I did have to pause that video. Just gonna make sure we're level, and we're not. Because slipped around. Solid hold. See if we're close enough to level now. Close. We should be able to just slide it over now. There we go. Some of these you may want to anchor. I think I will anchor this one. It fits pretty loosely. Others I've built before that fit very snugly over the wood that I put on the wall, and I didn't anchor them. But it's just kind of what you feel like you needed with that particular piece. And there you go. That's how you do it.